The old man's hand trembled as he tightened the last knot on the rope. His wrinkled fingers, scarred by time and life's cruelty, pulled with surprising strength. The figure bound to the chair groaned, muffled by the cloth shoved deep into his mouth. The flickering light bulb above them buzzed, casting long shadows across the damp walls of the abandoned warehouse on the edge of Detroit. "You don't remember me, do you?" the old man whispered, his voice rasping like rusted metal. "But I remember you, every night." "For 50 years, the man in the chair thrashed, his eyes wide with panic. The old man leaned closer, his face inches away, his breath heavy with the bitterness of age and the stench of vengeance. "Tonight," he said, his voice low and steady, "we settle the debt. But this isn't where the story begins. No, this is where it returns." 50 years earlier, in a small Ohio town, a young man named Arthur Miller was just another dreamer. He had nothing except his love for Mary, a woman whose laugh could light up even the coldest winter night. She was his anchor, his reason to work double shifts at the steel mill and save for the small home they dreamed of. But there was another man, Richard Calloway, wealthy, connected, cruel, the kind of man who thought money was law and arrogance his birthright. He wanted Mary too, and when he couldn't have her, he decided no one could. It was a night Arthur would never forget. Rain poured down, thunder shaking the ground. Arthur returned from his shift, only to find flames devouring his small wooden house at the edge of town. He screamed her name, Mary's name, until his throat tore. But inside the flames, she was gone, and standing at a distance, hidden in the shadows. Richard Calloway watched with cold satisfaction. The town forgot that night. Everyone moved on, but Arthur never did. His heart became a graveyard of promises, and in that graveyard bloomed only one flower: vengeance. He swore it silently, as the fire consumed his world. One day, when you've grown old, when your empire has made you arrogant enough to feel untouchable, I'll come for you. I'll take from you what you took from me. But time is a cruel master. Arthur grew old, his bones weakened, his back bent. People whispered that vengeance fades with age, that the fire in old men dies into ash. They said he was harmless now, just another forgotten relic of the past. But they were wrong, because fire, no matter how small, still burns. Back in the warehouse, Arthur circled the chair. Richard Calloway, now an old man himself, struggled against the ropes. His once proud face, lined with age, showed the fear he had never known in his youth. Arthur smiled bitterly. "Strange, isn't it? Time has made us equal. Once, you were the lion and I the lamb. Now, two old men, waiting to see who dies first." He dragged a rusty chair in front of Richard and sat, his knees cracking. He leaned forward, his eyes burning with decades of rage. "Do you remember Mary?" he asked. Richard's eyes darted nervously, but he said nothing. The gag silenced him. "Of course, you do," Arthur continued. "The night you burned her alive, the night you took everything from me. You thought I'd die in grief. You thought the years would bury your crime. But here I am, still breathing, still waiting." The sound of rain echoed outside, dripping through holes in the tin roof. Arthur lit a candle, placing it on the table between them. Its flame wavered, painting the room in shades of orange and shadow. "I want you to feel what I felt," Arthur whispered. "The helplessness, the despair, the way every second stretches into eternity when you know you're about to lose everything." He pulled out a faded photograph from his pocket, a young woman smiling in the sunlight. "Mary?" He placed it gently before Richard. 50 years I've carried this," Arthur said. "Her face is still clear in my mind. But did you even think of her once? Did you even care?" Richard thrashed harder, muffled cries rising from his gag. His eyes were pleading now, begging for mercy. Arthur shook his head slowly. "Mercy is for men who regret." "Do you regret?" The silence answered for him. "But vengeance is never simple." As the candle burned, Arthur's mind raced. For 50 years, he had dreamed of this moment. He had rehearsed every word, every action. But now, with his enemy before him, doubt crept in. Would killing him bring peace? Would it silence the screams that haunted him? Or would it make him no different from the man he despised? The old man's hand shook as he reached into his coat. his fingers wrapped around the cold steel of the revolver. Slowly, he pulled it out and set it on the table. Richard's eyes widened in terror. Arthur chuckled darkly. "Don't worry. I won't pull the trigger so soon. No, you wait. You wait like I waited. You'll feel time drag like chains around your throat." And so, the old man told his story. Hour after hour, as the candle melted, he spoke of the nights he spent starving in a rundown Pittsburgh boarding house, while Richard grew fat on stolen wealth. Of the days he looked bored on construction sites, his hands bleeding, with nothing to live for but vengeance. Of the loneliness that wrapped around him like a coffin, all because one man's greed couldn't accept love he couldn't buy. Richard listened helpless. Every word was a blade cutting through the years of his arrogance. "You thought age would weaken me," Arthur said, his voice low but steady. "But age sharpened me. It stripped away everything else until only this remained. Revenge, it's the only reason I'm alive today." Then came the moment. The candle had burned low, its flame flickering. Arthur lifted the revolver, his hand trembling. He pointed it at Richard's chest. The silence was deafening. Richard closed his eyes, bracing for death, but the trigger didn't pull. Instead, Arthur lowered the gun. He leaned closer, his voice a whisper of venom. "No death is too easy, too quick. I waited 50 years. Why should you escape in a second?" He stood, his body trembling with fury and exhaustion. "You'll live, but you'll lose everything. The empire you built, the wealth you hoarded, the respect you stole, it will all crumble, and you'll watch it burn, just like I did." And with that, Arthur revealed his final move. Over the past decade, while Richard grew comfortable in his old age, Arthur had been planning. Quietly, patiently, like a spider weaving a web. He had gathered evidence, bank records, court documents, testimonies from former business partners, proof of every crime Richard had committed: fraud, corruption, bribery, even arson. He had it all, neatly packed and ready to be delivered to the FBI. "By tomorrow," Arthur said, his voice cold as ice, "the world will know who you are. Your name will rot in the gutter. Your family will abandon you, and you will live the rest of your days as I did alone. Haunted, forgotten." Richard's muffled scream tore through the air. His eyes bulged with terror, not of death, but of disgrace. Arthur leaned closer, whispering one last line. "Death would have been mercy. But you don't deserve mercy." And with that, he left. The warehouse door creaked shut, leaving Richard Calloway bound and drowning in the darkness of his own fear. The rain outside washed the world clean, but inside, the old man walked away not free, not healed, but fulfilled. For vengeance, like fire, does not warm. It burns. And in the end, two old men had faced each other not as lion and lamb, not as rich and poor, but as ghosts of their past. Only one walked away with power, and the other was left to rot. But the story doesn't end there. For even as Arthur disappeared into the night, whispers began to spread. By morning, Calloway's empire started to collapse. The FBI raided his Manhattan penthouse. Former allies turned against him. His family, ashamed, fled. The newspapers carried his name, not as a tycoon, but as a criminal. And Richard Calloway, once untouchable, was reduced to nothing. Meanwhile, Arthur returned to the small cemetery on the outskirts of Cleveland where Mary's ashes lay. He knelt, his knees stiff with age, and placed the photograph down. "It's done," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I couldn't give you life again, Mary, but I gave him death while he still breathed." A single tear rolled down his weathered cheek. Then he stood, leaning on his cane, and walked into the fog of the morning. Because vengeance does not end with blood. It ends with silence. And silence is the loudest scream of all.